Stefan the roofer lives just up the road from us with his wife, Celeste, and their 2 teenage daughters. Their house used to belong to someone in Celeste's family and came into their possession as a marriage gift. So that means Celeste is local to this area, and I once asked Stefan if he came from around here too. "Around here?" he said. "No, certainly not. Not around here." "Okay," I said, "so where were you born?" "Up that way," he replied, waving his hand towards the hill behind us. "My family has a farm over towards Bazouge." Bazouge is about 8 miles from here. There's a good modern road on which you can do the journey in 15 minutes or less, but Stefan's family live along the old road, which is now very little used. From here it winds this way and that along the edges of cattle pastures, orchards and maize fields, fringed by apple and chestnut trees. After a few miles it passes through the silent village of Vieux-Viel, which has a church, a walled cemetery, a pond and a bar tabac, but no baker or grocer, or in fact any shops at all, so that most of the time it seems empty, as though the place had been abandoned. From there the road climbs a hill and heads across a small section of the forest of Villecartier, which is a forest in the old sense. You might see a deer slipping out of sight into a thicket, or a family of wild boar scampering through a clearing, and there are a few tracks leading off to left and right and disappearing among the oaks and beeches, but there are no houses to be seen. No cosy cottages with wisps of smoke curling out of their chimneys, and hardly any sign of human activity. Then, as the trees thin out, there's a change. You come out into a bleak and lonely stretch of upland farmsteads where the names on the road signs don't refer to towns or villages, but to individual properties. This is the area where Stefan was born, his pays, his country, perhaps 4 miles from his wife's pay where he lives now. There are farms and fields here, but nothing else, so it feels strangely remote, like Brittany as you imagine it must have been long ago, with people living in primitive, traditional ways, eating only what they could grow or gather themselves, using arcane local words like nene for non, abiding by idiosyncratic family customs, and claiming illness, ignorance, or illiteracy when tax time comes around. This brooding atmosphere of isolation doesn't last long. All of a sudden, the farmsteads fade out and the road turns a sharp corner by a derelict house and comes out of the trees at the top of a slope. Modern agricultural civilization reappears, and you can see across the valley to the tall church spire of Bazouge, surrounded by a cluster of houses on the other side. Visitors from afar would never guess that they had passed through 3 distinct areas on this short journey, and there's nothing on any map to put them right. But to the local mind, the differences are perfectly clear, sharply alive and deeply ingrained. In these communities, history evolves slowly. Time is counted in seasons and cycles. The centuries weave patterns of connected memories. Incidents are forgotten, eventually, but the patterns remain. A crooked stone tower still just standing in the village of Entrain was the old prison. Here vagabonds and wrongdoers were locked in cold stone chambers, with nothing but a few fistfuls of straw and, on good days, a crust of bread. Behind it is a street still paved with the huge original medieval cobbles sloping down from the sides into a central gutter, where the rain washed away whatever people threw from their doors or windows. In Tremblay lives a stonemason whose house, according to village records, was built in the year 1020, more than 1,000 years ago. The staircase and the kitchen work surfaces were made from blocks of local granite and are still there, still in use. And among the families in the deep countryside, says Stefan, who fixes their roof problems, a dwindling handful still live with earthen floors, hand-dug privies, and water from the stream. In a few such places, but more than you would think, he adds darkly, can be found sinister situations in which wife-beating, child abuse, fear, cruelty, dilapidation, and neglect still quietly fester, fueled in the main by cider, the ancient culprit. Today's tourists drive or cycle all over this landscape, happy to be exploring rural Brittany, as indeed they are, but to their eyes its only divisions are those marked on the map. Its true alliances and fragmentations remain hidden. They see nothing of those strange and frightening domestic deprivations, nor of the many and complex local rivalries, jealousies, feuds, resentments, and animosities that set one hamlet, village, farm, or family against another, hissing softly beneath the pastoral calm like acid dripped on an iron plate. All these differences are, of course, resolved, or at least shelved, by Bazouge itself, provider of the focal point and range of services that everyone needs. The flower-lined square with its busy Thursday market, the pharmacy, the baker and pâtisserie with its intricate cakes and homemade chocolates, the post office, the electrical goods store, and the 3 cafes with their tables and chairs set out beneath once colourful, now faded awnings. Bazouge also fancies itself as a bit of a cultural centre, and has converted no less than 9 otherwise unused shops into galleries to display works of sculpture, photography, ceramics and textiles made by local artists, who are occasionally seen flitting through the streets in beards and berets splashed with paint. There is a stone obelisk that commemorates the many local men killed in the First World War, and a cemetery where vast family tombs decorated with all the tasteless magnificence of Catholicism jostle for space with sad little individual memorials. The tiny grave of Charlotte, dead only 5 days after her birth in 1931, or the riot of marigolds still carefully tended on the resting place of Jean-Luc, killed on the Somme at the age of 20. And then there's the church itself, with its richly polished wooden lectern carved with detailed figures of the apostles, and its 2 stone fonts, one of which is covered with relief carvings of scallop shells, oak leaves, and other rural symbols that must have had local significance in the very earliest days of Christianity, and probably long before that. On one outside wall of the church, 3 globe-like objects hang from iron bars of different lengths, which are all suspended from a huge ring set deep into the stones. The globes are made from slices of oak, shaped and fitted together in the same way as the segments of an orange, and bound within studded iron frames. Their colours are faded, and in some places the wood is rotting away, but you can still see that the top globe, the smallest, is painted yellow and green. The middle one is mainly green on top with some yellow and blue underneath, and the lowest one, the largest, is mainly red, with some traces of yellow and orange. There is a small rectangular sign at ground level on which are painted 2 words, Trois mondes, or 3 worlds. We puzzled over this object for some time, finally deciding that it was kept outside the church rather than inside, because it conveyed a message that the people of Bazouge needed to be reminded of every day, every time they pass along the street. The middle globe, it seems, represents the world, or rather the earth, green on top to symbolize the land, and blue underneath for the sea. The top globe would thus most likely be heaven, all green and yellow, although the yellow was perhaps supposed to be understood as gold, the colour of transcendental glory, and also of harvest plenty. The top globe is smaller than the middle one, perhaps because many earth folk would never get there, failing to repent of their sins with sufficient sincerity, and thus finding themselves consigned to the bottom globe, the largest, painted in the colours of flames to represent the fires of hell. Where you come from is still important in Brittany. Which village or hamlet, which community, which family. But where you're going in the future, that's another matter. Today, when people pass by the iron-bound spheres of the three worlds, maybe they think about that. Then again, maybe they don't.